Good morning and afternoon. It's Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific. Welcome all to the Sharing Show. I'm Kane. I'm joined today with David, better known as the Workday Sharing Guy, Logan, Teresa, and special guests.
Thanks, Kane.
So we are using Zoom today, and as always, if you'd like to interact with any of the panelists on the show, please make sure in the chat section you change it to all panelists and all attendees. And with that, we are ready to get started. So I think we will pass over to you, Teresa.
Great. I believe we're going to welcome David, the Sharing Guy.
Thank you, Teresa, and welcome to the show. Hi, this is David, the Sharing Guy. I have a disclaimer that I do at the start of every show to make clear to everybody that I no longer work at Workday. I left Workday almost exactly 7 years ago. I was employee 149. My views do not represent Workday. Share-a-thons are not training. What we're doing at the Sharing Show and with all my sharing events is customers sharing with other customers. It's knowledge sharing, not training. I highly recommend the Workday training. I've also added here on my disclaimer that I'm on a mission to help as many Workday customers as possible. Most recently, April, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I did something called the Calcfield Connection Hour. Fantastic times with several Calcfield sharing fans and those who somewhat understand Calcfields but wanted to get a deeper understanding. You'll see this post on my LinkedIn profile. The bottom right of all those pictures shows a winner of a game of rock, paper, scissors. The calendar shows out of all the work days in April, and actually spread across 5 weeks, 64% of those days were sharing events. One final thing I'd like to mention is we have a lot of surprises coming in May, and these will all be announced on my LinkedIn group called the Ninja Sharing Team. This shows one of my sharing pages on community, and you'll see here we are now doing themes on the sharing show. We are announcing after today's Boomerang theme, we will have a recruiting theme in 2 weeks, and in 4 weeks, financials theme, and also Workday Cloud Platform theme in 6 weeks. Today's show is about boomerangs, and let's take a look at this community post that I call the Boomerang Library. I started the Boomerang Library approximately a year ago after a Boomerang Share-a-thon where several people wanted to obtain the boomerangs that other people had written and wanted to share. People both wanted to share and be shared with. On the right, I show that this is a typical post that includes calc fields. Looking back at this, I believe this is why we spent so many shows focusing on calc fields, and why I spent 64% of the last 5 weeks of my work days connecting with customers who want to have a deeper understanding of calculated fields. This picture shows on the right a calculated fields dashboard. We've mentioned this before on the show. It's actually a smart sheet. It's something you get access to from a link on the sharingshow.com webpage. This brings us back now to our Boomerang theme and a reminder that the very first ever airing of the Sharing Show, Season 1, Episode 1, Mike, my second favorite sharing fan, showed us 2 of his boomerangs. One that I was particularly interested in handles a situation of parsing resumes where people had their name in all uppercase. Mike explained that in a short boomerang integration, he pulls out names and fixes the case from all uppercase to proper case and puts them right back into Workday. He then shared some examples. As you see, McDonald in all uppercase was fixed to appropriately MAC with a capital D, McDonald. That's a brief reminder of our boomerang theme. This picture shows a slide from our previous show. We weren't sure if we were going to have a boomerang theme, but also on June the 10th, we opened this up for anyone who wanted to co-host and name a theme. I'll pass now to Logan, who will give us an update on this.
So what we have coming up are recruiting, financials, and we also have Extend, which was previously known as the Workday Cloud Platform. And moving forward, we would like to know, after we finish Workday Extend, would you like to co-host? And so if you have a theme that you want to share, you can contact us at thesharingshow.com and let us know what your thoughts are and what you'd like to do.
Thank you, Logan. So for those who aren't sure what Workday Cloud Platform is or why we're helping you know, I think it's just this week's news that Workday's changed it. And this isn't under any non-disclosure with Workday. You know, my insiders at Workday help me know what's going on. So I'm sharing with you guys. That's a web page that's public right there. And you can see it's very clearly the name is changing to Workday Extend. But when I say changing, it's just this week, the link here still says Cloud Platform. And if you click that link, it does open up to something that says extend our applications using Workday Cloud Platform, right? So this is all coming up in Workday. So now let's, let's take questions in the chat about extend or Cloud Platform if you want.
Thank you, David. What's up next on our agenda?
I'm going to do one more thing, and then we're on to our guest. Is that happy anniversary to all of us. A lot of us here celebrating almost to the exact day 4 years ago, the very first ever reporting Share-a-thon. So I want to say happy 4-year anniversary. I know 1, 2, 3, at least like 5 of you here are joining. A couple of you are guests. So for those who don't know about it, you can look on YouTube and you will see the irony here is that 4 years ago, there was this thing called WebEx. It was long before we were all doing Zooming, Zoom bombing, Zoom fatigue. And we had people on a WebEx for 4 hours. So yeah, 4 years ago, groundbreaking. I do think WebEx is still around. So apologies to my friends that work there. But everyone's talking about Zoom, including my daughter. So that was 4 years ago. You could search on YouTube for Workday Share. You would see pictures from that, including the origins of all of this, right? So the origins of all of this is a friend of mine at Uber asking what are best practices on report tags. That started this whole sharing movement that we're part of.
Thank you, David. What's next on the agenda?
Next, we have Floyd from Tennessee sharing why and how.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome,
Floyd.
Floyd.
Okay, David had mentioned that this was an anniversary for the sharing show, and so I thought I would jot down a few thoughts to just go over really quickly on why this is an important thing that your group and other groups are doing. So just some thoughts that I had jotted down were, it's really interesting to see how unselfish collaboration is so much more powerful than competitive hoarding of knowledge and techniques. You saw that before a lot of the stuff happened with Workday and open source areas of technology, and a lot of what we have today would not be available if that weren't available. So but you know, the kind of the side effect of that is you still have Workday trade secrets that have to be protected, and customer private information has to be protected. So figuring out how to do that collaboration in a way that protects that information is important. That's one reason I typically don't post a lot of stuff outside the Workday community, because I'm not certain whether there are people who might, from competitors who might try to get in that and use it for competitive advantage. And as David says in his things, you know, collaboration is not an excuse to skip training, or, as we've had happen a couple of times, have somebody send you their specifications and want you to do their work for them for free. It's really there to build on the training and experience of all the participants and allow multiple participants to work together to find new ways to use the tools that they've already learned. It also, I do not like the term best practice, because I think everything is varies between companies. So it's not really for a best option, but to give useful hints and possible multiple options for people to consider, and also to help them think about how you might go about considering different options and doing research in your tenant to find out what's best for you. We also hear and see in the Q&A forum on the community people that are asking things that have been asked from the business that really are not practical from a technical standpoint of doing something in Workday. So what we can try to do is to try to find out what the business objectives are, figure out some practical ways to do it that solves it in the most practical way, and may actually inform some enhancements in Workday via brainstorm to make things more practical if they're, going to be used on a regular basis. The Workday community has a lot of good opportunities for collaboration if people take advantage of them and use some time, the QA forum, shared solutions, either on the community or in the solutions tenant, and all kinds of various product and special interest groups that you can participate in. But there's also roles for external collaboration groups such as the Sharing Show and various other external groups to participate as well. There's some that are more organized, and then there's some ad hoc collaboration groups where people in the local area might meet, maybe even for lunch sometimes, or some virtual online groups that are just set up ad hoc. But one challenge I talked to David about that I feel bad about it and I don't know how to address it is that collaboration then becomes difficult when you're doing it across the world, including groups of people where English may not be their first and preferred language. So how to do that collaboration effectively across a multilingual population can be a challenge. And that's kind of what I jotted down just to go over today.
Okay, thank you, Floyd, for sharing that. Right, just a few notes that you jotted down. Right, I think I emailed you, and about 5 minutes later, you emailed me this list. Okay, maybe exaggerating a little bit. It might have been 7 or 8 minutes. But I do want to highlight this last one that you're talking about with the language, because you and I were talking about it. And I went ahead and gave it a shot. I took a sentence from community like we talked about. So I took the one from the Boomerang library that you see there on the left. And the idea is to translate it from English to German. And then what happens when we translate it from German back to English? It's not really the same as a Boomerang integration, but I just want to help people start thinking about this approach, right? So sure enough, you take English and go to German, and then take the German and go back to English. And I used Google Translate for this. And Floyd, you might be happy to see now, I only did German. I got lucky, right? There wasn't much time for me to try several languages. I do say, like, caution, don't try this at home, or if you try it at home before you let your kids do it. The only difference going back from German to English was an added one word. So that was a pretty amazing thing, Floyd. So thank you again, Floyd, for your input, and happy 4-year anniversary to you from the first Reporting Share-a-thon.
Thank you so much, Floyd, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. What do we have up next on our agenda?
Next, we have Melissa from Texas to share about persistence and courage.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome, Melissa.
Well, I wanted to thank David for letting me come back to the sharing show. I was here at the last episode to share thoughts. I first volunteered to help David with the first event, and I honestly was so green. I thought my main contribution would be only monitoring the Q&A and taking notes, because I thought report writing and calculated fields were so hard. But somehow I ended up presenting on the last day of sharing. Now, the sharing show wasn't magical. I still had no idea how report fields and values would ever be meaningful to me. I was intimidated by the 1,000 fields to scroll through. But my main takeaway from that very first interaction was that I was encouraged to be persistent, to learn more. And just fast forwarding, I'm now using report fields and values as a tool to save time on configuration, and able to add comments to threads about calculated fields for fine tuning. I feel very comfortable with the tools. And that investment of time was through asking a lot of questions, not being afraid to start, to pivot, and of course sharing even my small learnings, maybe that would help a brand new customer to acclimate. But what I really wanted to share here is that the sharing movement really helped me move from that's hard, it's intimidating, to hey, this is familiar, to really being able to gain some skill. And I just encourage you guys, whenever you are faced with anything from your business, or you're wanting to broaden your workday practice, to not give up, because we're all capable of anything to some degree, and we don't have to be musicians to appreciate music. We don't have to be health coaches to eat well at home, and we don't have to be Floyd to appreciate community. We just really need to start somewhere and dedicate time and effort, and reach out to our partners along the way. And David has led so many events and coordinated so many opportunities for me to have that. So I like to give back, and I'm always around if anyone needs anything. But I'm probably not going to be able to answer everything with as much skill as some of the other presenters we have here. But I'm here for you guys.
Okay, thank you, Melissa, and happy 4-year anniversary to you.
You too.
Thanks, Melissa, for sharing. I think it's so important to be able to ask for help and to be able to offer help when you have it on the other side. So that goes for everything in Workday and everything outside of Workday. Thank you so much. We'd love to have you back on the show. What do we have up next on our agenda?
Next, we have Charlie from Arizona, who's going to talk about several boomerangs that can be found in production.
Hi there. This is Charlie. First, I'd like to thank David for starting this 4 years ago. I think I was in that first 4-hour WebEx, and it was quite an eye-opener. We have many boomerangs in production in our system. This is just a few examples of the ones we have. A couple asks we had from financials were to create average and month-end FX rate currency exchange rates in the tenant. We currently already have a feed from Bloomberg that sets it up every day, but rather than ask Bloomberg for another special report, we created 2 boomerangs, which basically read or retrieve from Workday the current month of currency rates for all of our currencies. We currently have about 125 different currencies in our tenant, create all the averages, and then stuff them back into Workday using the web services. Boomerangs are really useful for sort of extending what Workday provides, in that you can create these either studios or EIBs or any type of integration that basically takes data from Workday, manipulates it in some manner, and sends it back into Workday to be used by different reports, different groups, different places inside of Workday with this new data. Another example was that we had many managers who did not terminate a contractor's contract when the contract ran out. Since all of our workers are sent down to AD, which gives them access throughout our network for different places, it was very important for our auditors to be able to enforce contract ending and terminating AD access. So we had problems with managers not doing this for 2 to 3 weeks after someone terminated their contract. So we created a boomerang which retrieves all of the contractors who expire on a specific date. And when that date expires, we terminate their worker account, which then filters out through our normal Workday to AD integrations. Another one was that we had a set of people who enter new suppliers in our system. We have thousands of different suppliers all over the world, but they don't have access to set reference IDs, which are used in other downstream systems. And we couldn't give this group access to set reference IDs because they would be able to set every reference ID in the whole tenant, which could drastically affect the running of the tenant. So we created a boomerang that says whenever they created a supplier, we went in and ran the the Boomerang with an ISU access, which does have access to set references. And we just stuck that into the BP of the creating supplier mechanism. Another big one was that we frequently rehire people after a few months, and we have set up our deductions as payroll input lines for some various things, like voluntary deductions and charity deductions and things like that. We do not want those to reactivate when people are rehired. So in the terminate for the worker BP, we put in a Boomerang, which basically goes in and end dates all of those payroll input lines, so that if they get rehired, the deductions don't start up unless they manually go in and restart up that deduction at the vendor site. One of the first ones that we did was when we first went on live on Workday, our previous ERP did not support non-UTF-8 name characters and names, so that when we sent files to vendors like UHC and Wells Fargo, they didn't receive these. When Workday was first implemented, we were pretty surprised to find that a lot of our vendors bounced our files and wouldn't process them because they had special characters. So we had to create this Boomerang, which we put into the two BPs for hiring a worker and hiring a contractor, which basically took the legal names that were entered in the hire process, sent them to the Boomerang, did an XSLT, translated them if they had contained characters that did not have, that were not in the UTF-8 character set, and then put them back into the legal names fields in Workday, so that when files get sent to vendors, they get processed. That's just a few of them. They're very, very important to us. We keep on coming up with new ones every couple months. And that's about it. Thanks.
All right, so Charlie, I went ahead and showed people here, so because there's some chat questions about where do you find this. If you could just remember Boomerang Library, you will see in there several Boomerangs. And then there's a picture here of Charlie's post where he said, here's his solution. And it's a separate page. And then that page has an example in it. And also, there's several comments to help people understand how do you go about importing a solution. So I'll go about that pretty quickly. Underneath there is Workday Studio Code. So Charlie, I went ahead and I'm showing your studio code here. So just so that people know that at one point you're reusing some studio code perhaps. And we have a guest who might talk about that here coming up next. So importing a solution, you search for browse solutions. And when you have the solution that you found, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go through this quickly just because we're a little bit short on time. Eventually get to a point where you've imported a solution. So Charlie's put it up there for the whole world, and then you grab it and it comes into your tenant.
Thanks, David. Thank you so much, Charlie, for sharing. It looks like there are a lot of people very interested in what you had to say and how they can use it. What do we have up next on our agenda?
Next, we have Anthony from South Carolina to talk about club membership Boomerang.
Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, yes, Anthony. Welcome, Anthony.
All right. So our company went through kind of a transition where we needed to automate some manual processes. And one of them that went through payroll was our corporate location can have a club membership or like a country club membership. And they would have to request it through payroll. They would have to fill out a form, send it to payroll. They'd have to approve it. They'd have to manually enter the payroll input based on how they their pay frequency. So we had a new group come in for our employee services group, and they wanted to try to automate this. So it was tasked to me and one of my coworkers to figure out a way to do this. So how we did that was request framework plus a Boomerang. So what happens is now if they are on at our corporate location, our headquarters, they can see the request framework worklet, and they can go through and fill out this Lakeview membership request. Once they've got it approved, or once they've completed it and it's approved by our employee services group, it then skips the close step in the request framework. If anybody has dealt with that, you know how fun that step is if you don't absolutely need it. And then it goes and it runs a Boomerang. And the Boomerang is really, it's an EIB that calls a studio, and we'll talk about the studio towards the end. But what it does is it passes the request event, the initiator, and the request type from the request BP to the EIB, or the report. In this report, we are using the all request data source. And if any of you guys have used that and had to pull in questionnaire answers and questionnaire responses, you also know how much fun that can be using calc fields. So what we had to do was build some calculated fields that look up specific answers using extract single instance and true false calc fields. And also we had to look up the worker from person so that we could pull the information we need to populate the submit payroll input web service. And here's one example of how we did that. So the picture on the left is the questionnaire response object, or the calc field that sits there. And what we're doing is we're doing an extract single instance from questionnaire answers and looking for a specific question on the answer object. So that was fun to do initially because we had never played with questionnaires. So me and my coworker, this was a learning experience for us. And this is another example where it's doing the exact same thing, but in the right, you can see that it's looking for a different question. And the third one is the calc field that I had to use so that I could look up worker details such as their pay group, cost center, period end date, period start date for their last completed or next available period, all that stuff. We had to do a calc field for that because you have the request initiator, but that looks at the person object, and we had to get to the worker.
Anthony, I'm going to go back to where it shows in the report. There's like those 5 different fields on where it's highlighted on the left, right? That's the same calc field. And then you grab, okay.
Yes, sir, it is. And this is, and like I said, so what this was is on the BP for the request, it's an EIB. The EIB contains a transformation step with an XSLT, and this is really part of the XSLT we use to transform that report output into the submit payroll input web service format. And you'll see why this is important in the next slide. This studio is something that I actually found on Community, and it may have even been on the Boomerang library. It's a contributed solution that basically will call any web service as long as you have it formatted correctly through XSLT. So what we do as part of the EIB, any EIB we use now for a simple, what I call a simple Boomerang, we call the web service requester, and really you just add it as a step in the BP, and then you have 3 parameters you have to populate for it, and that is the input document, which is the deliverable documents from your EIB, your web service, and then the API version. That's it. There's no studio code, no nothing. And like I said, as long as it's a simple, we only need to call one web service to do something, and you don't necessarily, well, this solution actually does provide audit. So, but I think have my coworker on this call, and he came from somewhere that did not use this, and he was both happy and mad that we had discovered this and were using it, because it drastically improved the amount of time it takes to build a Boomerang, especially if you don't have to use Studio. I love Studio, but the fact that Shannon shared this on Community and I was able to take it and we can use it, it drastically reduces the amount of time it takes to develop a Boomerang by a significant amount.
Okay, thank you, Anthony, and hats off, Shannon, if you're listening, because this isn't the first time on this show that we've had somebody reference your post here on community. Okay, thank you, Anthony.
That is a plethora of information, and it looks like the chat has become quite lively as a result. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us. It's great to have you. And what do we have up next on our agenda?
Indy is going to do a financials focused airing of the sharing show in 4 weeks. We've got recruiting in 2 weeks, and then we have financials in 4 weeks. I will show here that there is this community page of a secondary ledger currency Boomerang integration, and there is a lot of information there. So when people are asking, like, where do you find all this? Well, search for the word community inside, search for the word Boomerang inside of community. That's one way to find it. But the Boomerang library has several different links, like Charlie's from earlier came off of that library.
That's great. Thanks, David, for stepping in for Indy, and we look forward to seeing him in a couple of weeks. We would also like to thank SnapLogic as a co-sponsor of our show. We'd like to say thank you to David, the sharing guy, another co-sponsor of our show. And we'd like to thank Kane and everyone at Dovetail. Dovetail provides HR service delivery software that reduces the number of questions into HR by over 50%. Dovetail also provides emergency response management software that provides HR with tools to manage all coronavirus-related questions from employees. In addition, Dovetail is tracking COVID-19 case volumes from HR teams globally. So if you would like to learn more, please visit dovetailsoftware.com and they can help you out with that.
Okay, Kane. Is there anything you'd like to add, Kane, by the way, for all the work you've been doing, the great work you've been doing for the COVID-19 and shelter in place?
So the only thing, thank you, David, and thank you, Logan. The only thing I might add is if you are interested in seeing our daily statistics that we are publishing around about midday each day, head over to our website and on the homepage, click on HR stats or COVID-19 HR stats. And then also every Monday, we are pushing out an analysis page about the previous week's stats. And the most interesting one, what we saw last week, is that HR is having to basically catch up, working in their own free time and also working on weekends to catch up on all the questions coming in from employees on the coronavirus type related questions. And there's a fantastic word cloud you can go look at as well on our site that brings in all the different types of case types that people have been using, our customers have been using out there in the field. So thank you for that, David. And thank you to Logan. Thank you, Teresa. And special thank you to our guest that joined us on the show today. Don't forget to head over to our YouTube channel where we publish all of this content on our YouTube channel. Please head over, click like, click subscribe so you'll get notified when this episode goes live. So all that's left to do is to say, everybody, have a great workday.